Okay. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi everybody. My name is Francesca. I'm going to be talking a little bit about self-care, time management, and how to prioritize your time. Kind of from an academic lens, since this is, Boston Fig Learns. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about my own academic career and sort of how I have changed how I structure my time and how I manage my goals in a way that has been more productive and happy and healthy for me. Hi, I am Francesca. I am the president and co-founder of Contigo Games, which is an independent game studio. We focus around multiplayer games, usually cooperative, so players can have positive collaborative experiences together. I also work with Girls Make Games as an ambassador and instructor. So they're a great organization. They run summer camps and workshops for around middle school age girls in order to teach them about games and technology, coding, and let them know that they could have a career in technology in the future. I'm currently also a graduate student at the New York University Game Center. So I'm currently working on my thesis. I'm graduating this year. I'm very, very excited. So I'm getting a degree in game design. Cool. So these are some of my current projects that I'm working on. Some of you saw these yesterday in my other talks, but I'll go through them again quickly. So in the top left is Hell Couch. Hell Couch is a couch co-op game where the couch is the controller, and you hop around on the couch with a friend or two friends, and it's a game that you play with your butt. There's not too many of those, so I'm pretty proud of it. And then on the top right, we have Chroma, which is a strategic territory capturing game that is about, you play it by color blending the different pieces. And Starcrossed is the game that I'm working on with my studio, Contigo Games. It's a cooperative action arcade game about magical girls in space. And as of a couple weeks ago, we're officially on Steam, and you can wishlist us if you're interested in doing that. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about, the full title of this talk was Oops, I Forgot to Sleep, Balancing Your Academic Career, Extracurricular Ambitions, and Your Personal Well-Being. So if you're here, I'm assuming you're a very busy person, which is great. That's awesome. But I'm also guessing maybe you have some time management issues. Maybe you don't get to everything that you want to get to in a day or in a week. Or maybe you're someone who does miss deadlines so much, or once in a while, because you have so much going on, right? So how many people are students? Cool. How many people have been students? Cool. For those of you that are students, are you in a game design or development program currently? Okay, cool. I was curious because I did my undergraduate also in game development, and something that I heard over and over and over again in talks about how to break into the industry or how to get a job and whatever, people always tell you that what you're doing in school is not enough to get you a job. And you have to be doing extracurriculars, and you have to be doing game projects outside of class. Have you guys heard this as well? Yeah, it's very common advice. And I want to acknowledge that that's a big ask for students, because you're already doing a full-time academic career, and to be working on a game, even a 3D model, having a job, which a lot of people have to have a job to pay for school. You're doing that on top of a full-time schedule already, and that's a lot. And I don't think people acknowledge that, so I want to say that. So this talk is going to be me reflecting a little bit on my own strategies for being productive, happy, and healthy. These strategies I'm sharing might seem a little bit obvious once I say them, but they have made a really big difference in my life, and I think they're important. So I'll be comparing a little bit about like my undergrad self and how I was like a hot mess versus my graduate self and how I'm like a much more like functioning human. So I hope that's helpful to you. The biggest point that I want to make of why this stuff is important, you can take a picture of this one. You can't make games if you're dead. So this is generally my big point of why self-care is super, super important. You only have the one body that you're living in until we, get that cyborg technology a little more figured out. So take care of your body, take care of your mind. Do not be proud of crunching. We have a, especially in academia, we have this culture of being like, yeah, I pulled an all-nighter and like I did my project and like I worked really hard. We're proud of the work that we put in, which is fantastic, but we shouldn't be proud of having to exert all of that extra time and effort and kind of driving ourselves insane. So try not to be proud of crunching, try not to be proud of pulling all-nighters, because these are signals that you're sort of failing to manage your time and to be productive because you're having to use all that extra time to meet your goals. So before we get into it, I want you to think a little bit about what your work style is. We're not going to say them out loud, so try to be honest to yourself. Are you a procrastinator who thrives under pressure? That's me. Are you someone who is easily overwhelmed by the pressure of tasks, so you feel you have to start them absolutely as soon as possible, or you get very overwhelmed? Do you like working around other people? Do you like working by yourself in a little room? Do you make task lists? Do you like to multitask? Do you like to focus on one thing at a time? I think that's really important to figure out so that you can maximize your productivity. So now that we have that in mind, I'll introduce you to someone who I mentioned earlier in the talk. This is me in undergrad. This is when I was writing my final paper, the final thing. Oh my God, Caroline, don't take a picture of this, please. This is me in undergrad when I was writing like my final paper that I needed to graduate. And you'll see that I have I put on a scarf and I have a little bowl of like goldfish that I was eating while I was typing, and I didn't want to take my hands away from the keyboard, so I put it here, and like, it's very embarrassing. Mike took this picture. I was thinking about all of the things that I had committed myself to doing in undergrad, because I thought that like the more I did, the more impressive that looks, right? You want to build that resume. Valid point. But as I said, like being a full-time student on top of doing a double major, I then found out I had to do 2 senior projects, so this was me doing the second one. I was running a game dev club, so that's a lot of time of like actively participating in the activities, but also spending time planning them. I also worked as a writing tutor. I also worked driving the campus shuttle, which was night shifts, so I was sometimes working until 4 a.m. doing driving, which I really liked, but it was a lot of time. The other thing, I founded a new club in my senior year. I was a volunteer organizer of a local game meetup. Again, a lot of organization. I was doing a podcast. I was also in a relationship. That's something to consider. Like your social life takes a lot of time and energy and a lot of emotional energy out of you. The other thing I realized I forgot to put up here is that for about a year of my undergrad, I was doing a part-time unpaid internship for like a game company. And that was something I was putting like 10 hours into every week, basically just like managing spreadsheets. Because I thought being involved with that organization would look really good on a resume, and I think it did, but like, was it worth doing all of that extra work that was unpaid? Probably not, because I was kind of losing my mind. So just consider like everything you're doing takes a lot of time and energy. And I was just way too busy. I was also a super procrastinator, which just contributed to the problem. So I want to talk a little bit about like what I was doing wrong, what I'm doing differently now, and how my life has improved. Here's another picture of me like still writing that paper. I bought myself all these comics as like incentive to finish so that I could read them, but it didn't help. I was just very miserable. Okay, so the first thing to do, I think, is to keep your goals in mind. Like take some time to actually write down your goals and really think about what they are and then you can figure out your path to achieve them. So think about what skills you want to learn, maybe the next step in your career. Think about what you want to achieve in the next year. And break down your goals into small and specific. As an example, so I mentioned I'm graduating soon, so my goal is to get a job as a game designer, which is my degree. So that's my goal for the next year. So everything I'm doing now is leading me towards that goal. And then once you figure out your goal, it's a lot easier to figure out what you need to do to get there and how to manage your time to achieve it. Okay, so the next thing is focusing your time and energy. So the problem with my undergrad self, I have realized in hindsight, is that I was raised to be like a high achiever. And I think like we're always told this is a good thing, that you always want to do your best, you always want to be on your A game, and you always want to give 100%. And I want to challenge that idea. Because if you're always trying to run at 100% for everything you do, you're going to burn out, and then you can't be good at anything. So I suggest managing your time by estimating how much time you need to do like the minimum deliverable for that task, like a place that you're proud of it, but you're not going over the top with like perfectionism and making it like the absolute best thing you can ever create. So figure out what the minimum is, and then look and figure out which tasks are the most important to achieving those goals that we decided on earlier. And then take your remaining time that you have available and allocate them to those important tasks, so that those are the ones that are excelling and those are the ones that you're spending time polishing and making better. So my goal is to get a job as a game designer. So one of my big priorities right now is that I'm working on a thesis project, and I'm spending a lot of time and energy figuring out like how can I format my thesis, and how can the content of my thesis demonstrate the skills that I have, so that when I'm applying for those jobs, I really have something that demonstrates what I'm capable of. And also I would say like I'm putting a lot of time and energy into like being visible. So managing my social media, managing my portfolio, coming out to events, things like that. Like those are very worthwhile and valuable uses of my time and energy right now. And I'm definitely someone who for a long time I felt really uncomfortable not doing my best at everything, because I think you feel like you're letting people down, or you're letting yourself down, or you're just not doing the best you could be doing all the time. And I think it's important to give yourself permission to focus less on the elements of your life that at the moment aren't important to those goals that you're trying to achieve. So this doesn't mean you're like blowing off assignments or showing up late to class every day. But you're just making sure that you're spending that extra time, like going to a networking event in your field instead of like, perfecting a paper for a history class if that's not the field you're going into. Like do the assignment, do the minimum to the point that you're proud of it and happy with your work, but don't pull an all-nighter, like writing this paper that after you submit it, you're never going to show it to anybody ever again. That's how I think about it. And also let yourself pass on opportunities. So don't say yes to everything. I know this is really, really hard for people. You get a really good job opportunity or like freelancing gig or something, or you really want to go to this event. Feel comfortable saying no and, giving yourself time to rest and recover, but also allocating that time to the things you're already doing so that they can be great. My general rule that I came up with in undergrad when I was doing too many things was that if I couldn't list everything I was doing in my Twitter bio, I was doing too much. So that's like 140 characters, right? So if I was doing too many things and I couldn't list them all there, it's like I needed to cut back a little bit. Okay, this is the next point, is go home. I think this is something that we talk about, like work-life balance in terms of careers, but we don't talk about it a lot in terms of academia. And I think this is really, really hard to do when you're an undergrad, especially if like you're living on campus, right? Because you're living where you're working, and also all your friends are also working at this place you're working, and your social circle is like intertwined with basically your career and your work. And even like your social activities are clubs that you're participating in on campus with the people that are in your classes who you're working with. So everything is kind of all mixed together, and it's really hard to separate and like not be thinking about work all the time, right? I think the best thing I did for myself in undergrad was actually moving off campus. That helped me a lot, like stepping away from my work for a minute. And I also had, like, my room was pretty small, so I had a desk that was actually like too small to comfortably work at. Like I could fit like my computer, but if I needed like a notebook or I needed like my drawing tablet, they're just like, it wasn't very comfortable for working. So I would go to the computer lab if I needed to work. And if you're someone who needs to be alone while working and you like being at home, I would recommend having like not work time or like a general time frame that is like not work time. So maybe like after 8 p.m. is like, I'm done for the day. And I think it's important to have like a home life which forces you to step away from work. So having like activities and people in your life who aren't necessarily related to your academic career. So in my graduate life, I have a partner who I live with. I have a very cute dog, and I want to spend time with them. And they're not at all related to like what I'm doing at school. So it's completely separate, and that's really helped me make a distinction. I know in undergrad that's not necessarily something that people have. I definitely didn't have it, and it was like a lot more difficult to separate. And I also think taking time to make your home space really comfy. So even if you're in a dorm, like taking time to like decorate your space and make it your own and make it a place that you generally want to spend time and are able to de-stress. And keeping it tidy is actually also very helpful. This is coming from someone who like, I'm a disaster. Like my room is always a mess. I always have trouble keeping things clean. But I found that putting in that effort makes it a lot easier for me to de-stress and be comfortable in my own space. This is going to be my last point, is get a hobby. I don't know if my dad's watching, maybe he is, but this is something I tell my dad all the time because he's also kind of a workaholic. We have that in common. So I think for this point, I also want to stress that having a hobby goes into the previous point about like having that work-life separation. But also I think if you're making games, I think having a hobby and having activities that aren't related to games, they make you a more interesting person, and they also make you a more rounded game designer and game developer. So I think your games become better when you're taking influence from not just games, obviously. Take it from other fields, take it from other activities, and bring it into your games so they can be more interesting and diverse. I kind of skipped around a little bit. So I was going to say that the trick here is to, for me at least, is to find something that keeps you mentally very occupied, so you're not able to think about work while you're doing it, but also find an activity that isn't like mentally strenuous. So you're still able to relax and rest your mind, but it is keeping you busy enough that you're not able to be like, oh shit, I have to write that paper. Like when I get home, what should I write? Like, and I think for students, it's also important that you find something that doesn't cost a lot of money to do, right? So because that's going to be a barrier that stops you from doing that activity and taking the time to do it. So things I've done is like gardening, or when I didn't have an outdoor space, I would just keep plants in my room that I would maintain and spend a lot of time with. Reading is a good one because your mind is totally occupied, but you're still not like working too hard to do it. Working out is also a really good one for more physically inclined folks. And I think this is kind of specific advice, but if you are like an artist and you are using your hand every day in your work in a very specific way, it's also important to rest your body with the activity that you choose. So choose something that uses your hands in a different way so that your muscles that you're using constantly for work are able to rest. I know a lot of artists who draw professionally, and then they also draw as their way to de-stress when they come home. That's like their fun time activity. But you will mess up your hands really bad doing that. So make sure you're resting both your mind and your body when you're doing these activities. So I mentioned that in my undergrad, I drove the campus shuttle as like my part-time job. This was actually, I used this as my hobby that separated me from work because I enjoy driving, and I also couldn't physically bring my work with me when I was doing it, and I also couldn't be thinking about my work while I was driving. And like, you always have a co-pilot in the shuttle, so like talking to to this person who isn't necessarily in my major, isn't necessarily in my classes. So I had that really good separation, and I was also getting paid to do it, which was awesome. So I think stepping away from your work is kind of scary because you're always thinking like, oh, this is time I could be spending on making that thing better. But I promise you that you will be way more productive. You will make better decisions when you are not tired, not anxious, and not overworked. You will get more done faster, and it will be better work. And you will generally feel better and more positive about the things you're making. So please get a hobby. And someone sent me this yesterday about Hulk sleeping, and when Hulk wakes up, maybe everything that made me tired will be gone magically. So the title of this talk is Oops, I Forgot to Sleep, but basically I just wanted to talk about like how we can avoid that, and it shouldn't be a necessary part of our work schedule and our structure of our lives. So please sleep, please rest your mind and your body. Be like Hulk, and rest will make you a little bit better able to perform and do your job well. So here's the recap of just things we went over. And if you have like other strategies that have worked for you, I would love to chat about them. And I hope that if nothing else, this talk has sort of made you think about different ideas or different strategies of how you can think about sort of like time management and your own productivity in a more sort of like goal-oriented fashion. So you can get where you want to go, but not die while you're on your way there. Because I think that's a good goal to have. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you so much. We have like 5 minutes if anybody wants to talk about this stuff, or if you want to suggest like other strategies or other activities I could try.
Have you ever tried meditation?
I have. I find that for me personally, I like doing things that are a little more like busy, as I was saying, because I do find that if I'm stressed out about something and I do try to meditate and sort of like be still and calm, my mind is still focused on that thing. So for me, I tend to focus more on activities that are like physical labor. Like usually if I want to do something kind of like meditation, I'll usually do like yoga or like working out in some way, because then my body is busy and I'm focusing more on like my physical self, so my brain can't really like fly away and think about the things I'm stressed about. So but I do know that is a strategy that works for a lot of people. So I think mindfulness in general is really important. Yeah.
I was going to share something. I tend to, it sucks because it's game related, but I tend to play rhythm games to de-stress because it's a different type of game where your brain is 100% focused.
That is true,
on
yeah.
the screen and the rhythms. And maybe if you play musical instruments, that would work too, but I don't. So, but
Yeah.
so that takes my brain completely away from my work.
Yeah, I think that's something that's, you have to be so focused, you can't think of anything else. So I think in terms of like relaxing your brain, I think that's a good way to separate. But in terms of like resting your body, I also recommend like having an activity that isn't screen related, especially if you're someone, or even like sitting related, because if you're someone who's sitting at a screen all day, like that can be really draining on your body. But different times of day and different situations, you need different things. Like sometimes it's just my brain that needs some resting, so like that's perfect. So yeah. Okay. Oh, did you have one more?
So I work at a university. They just opened a studio on campus, and they needed someone to run it. And like the whole goal, really, one of the things you mentioned is that like some very common advice is like what you're doing in school isn't enough. You have to have side projects.
Yeah.
And so like the goal is basically to bring like to like mesh those two, like make it so that the side projects are meeting the academic goals.
Yeah.
In your experience, have there been like ways to mesh those things that kind of you get more bang for your buck that way?
Yeah, I definitely think that like my own perception of my undergraduate career is that I was doing all of this extra stuff because I found that like the things or the assignments and things that I was doing in class, I was learning and I was improving, but it wasn't in a format that say I could like put it in my portfolio, which led towards that goal of me getting a job in the industry, right? So I think academic institutions can definitely format their curriculum and format their assignments in a way that sort of brings that extra stuff that you need to be doing into the classroom and sort of into that supportive environment. I think that's probably like the better way to do it. is be consciously thinking about like, what are the goals my students have, and like, how are we helping them specifically achieve those goals, and how can we do that in a supportive setting? Yeah, so I think like providing additional resources, like that's a great way to do it. Yeah, so that's great.
I just
yeah.
listening to your talk, like all those things that you're describing that like were so difficult in that context, like being on the university side, I'm like, we really have to fix those things. Like universities and institutions really have to get better about all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think also like something that has actually helped me a lot is that like my graduate school does not have a 24-hour lab. So like I cannot be there 24 hours. In contrast, someone I know is enrolled in an art university, and they just recently like advertised to the students as like a perk that they were opening a new 24-hour lab, right? That they could go and use, at 3 a.m. as a perk. And I think that's dangerous because you're communicating to the students that like, that is time that they should or could be spent working, and that is like somewhat expected, and that's a positive thing that you're, spending until 4 a.m. every night working on projects. And I think that's a really fast way to burn out. And I think academic institutions in general, especially ones for games, need to do a better idea of being more anti-crunch right from the beginning, so then we don't then bring those ideologies and those practices into the industry. So, yeah, but thank you for consciously thinking about that. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we are right at time. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. And I think it's lunchtime, right?